What's up, YouTube? I wanted to do a video on, well, I wanted to do kind of a series on beating popular meta decks, decks that a lot of people have been running lately, and this series is kind of just going to be an informational segment on what's good to side against these decks, what the major goals of these decks are. So I'm going to start out with Dark Worlds, obviously, that's why I have the Dark Worlds cards here. And I guess we'll just jump right into it. Dark World's major goal is to keep Grapha in the grave. If you counter this, Dark Worlds really struggles. The other major goal is to keep Gates of the Dark World on the field for their discard effects. So if we keep that in mind, if we want to prevent the discard effects, we could side things such as Gemini Imps. During other player's turn, when your opponent activates a spell card, trap card, or monster effect that would make you discard when it resolves, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it and draw one card. So this counters the Dark World dealings. It counters Mind Crush, counters Drag Down. It's a very good card against Dark Worlds, and essentially when you discard it to counter your opponent's card, you draw a card to replace it, so you aren't minusing from using it, which is very wonderful. There's also Abyss Dweller, which is an extra deck card that came out in Abyss Rising. While this card has an Exceed material attached that was originally water, that doesn't really matter. Once per turn, during either player's turn, you can detach one Exceed material from this card. Any card effects that activate in your opponent's graveyard cannot be activated this turn. So you could activate this on their turn, so that they can't discard for Grapha's effects or anything like that. So it's really good in that sense. It's almost like a Soul Drain built into a monster, which is very useful. We're also going to talk about Soul Drain, which is the next card actually. It pretty much does the same thing. It's kind of like Skill Drain, except that it negates the effects that activate in the graveyard and banish sections that start a chain. So when Grapha is discarded, Silva is discarded, Snow is discarded, Brow is discarded, Beige is discarded, any of those cards are discarded. If Soul Drain is on the field, they do not get their effects, because all of their effects activate in the graveyard, and that's one of the major, I would almost say, flaws of Dark Worlds, is that everything in their deck activates in grave. All their monster effects activate in grave. So if you have something like Soul Drain on the field, it cripples the deck entirely. It's probably the best side against Dark Worlds. Next is Shadow Imprisoning Mirror. It's the same idea. Your goal is to stop the discard effects, and this negates all Dark Monsters effects activated on the field or in the graveyard. So this shuts down the deck quite hard too. If you wanted to side multiple traps that would negate monster effects in the grave, then you would side both Soul Drain and Shadow Imprisoning Mirror. And you should probably be maining Abyss Dweller already. I find Gemini Imps to be kind of an iffy side. If you're entirely siding for Dark Worlds, like that is your absolute worst matchup, then yes, I would throw a couple Gemini Imps in. But considering the meta right now, I would almost not run the Gemini Imps just because of how I know the meta works. So it's not the greatest card to run in this particular format, but it's still a good side against Dark Worlds, and that's why I'm talking about it. So the other major goal of Dark Worlds is to keep Grapha in the grave, like once they discard it, because a lot of times they'll discard Grapha even if they can't get his effect off, because he's still a card that they can constantly re-summon from the graveyard, because he has a really, really easy summoning condition. So what you want to do is, there are two main deck cards that a lot of people run that do counter this. One of them is Bottomless Trap Hole. When Grapha has been discarded and after he's been summoned again using his really easy summoning condition, if you can hit him with a Bottomless Trap Hole, then he is essentially completely removed from the game, and you're probably not going to see him again, unless he discards another one, of course. But this is a really nice way to counter Grapha. And a lot of people already run this in the main deck, so there shouldn't really be an excuse when facing Dark Worlds. Next card is Dimensional Prison. If you think they're going to attack with the Grapha, you can set the Dimensional Prison down, have them attack into the Dimensional Prison, and you banish Grapha. The goal is to always banish Grapha. You want him gone. That is their major win condition. So if you can accomplish that, you essentially win. Another good option for this is, of course, Macrocosmos. They can't discard their monsters for their effects because they aren't being discarded to the graveyard. Also, if they do decide to discard them, they are banished instead, which is basically them crippling themselves. So a smart player who's playing Dark Worlds won't discard when a Macrocosmos is on the field because they won't get their effects they're discarding. So they really have trouble against decks like Macro Rabbit because Macro Rabbit runs Macrocosmos. But this card also really cripples Dark Worlds in many, many ways. Along the same lines, we have Dimensional Fissure. If you have a deck that needs to send spells and traps to the grave for drawing effects or whatever, like Six Samurai with United and Dojo, then I would run Dimensional Fissure instead, because any monster sent to the graveyard is banished instead. So when they try to discard Grapha for his effects, or just to have him in grave, he is sent to the banish section instead of the actual grave. And he doesn't get his effects because he needs to be banished to the graveyard to get his effects. So that's really good. Next is DD Crow. If you're a deck that can't really handle Macro or Fissure, then I would suggest running a couple hand traps such as DD Crow in your deck, because when they try to summon a Snow or something to return Snow back to hand to summon Grapha, what you can do is when they summon the Snow and you know that you're able to attack over the Snow, you can activate the DD Crow to banish the Grapha, and then they have a Crow, and then they have a Snow stuck on the field that you can attack over next turn, which they now can't discard for Snow's searching effect. So that's kind of what you do. You play it smart to counter your opponent's plays, obviously, because it's a hand trap, but it has the same goal as any of the other cards in this section, which is banishing Grapha. Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer. This is an absolutely amazing card against Dark Worlds. Mainly because they can't banish cards from either player's graveyard, and also when it deals battle damage, you can target up to 2 monsters in either in their graveyard and banish those targets. So if they have 2 or more Graphas in grave, and you really need to shut that down, what you can do is you can summon the Ghost Destroyer, attack into them, banish 2 of the Graphas, and then they can't banish cards for Dark Smog's effect to discard, or Gates of the Dark Worlds effect to discard, because both of those cards require you to banish from one of the player's graveyards in order to discard. So it shuts down 2 of the major discard engines in the deck. So that's some of the major cards that counter Grapha being in grave. You always want to banish him. That's pretty much the major goal of facing Dark Worlds. Like, if anything, if you can't prevent their discard effects, then banish Grapha. If you can't remove the discard engine, then banish Grapha. That is the biggest goal when facing Dark Worlds. Speaking of removing the discard engine, you could run Dust Tornado, because it's back row removal. You can use it to get rid of their field spell, you can use it to get rid of their Dark Smog. They run a lot of continuous spells and traps like that to discard. However, this isn't quite as good because they also run a lot of cards that are just activate, so like Drag Down to the Grave, Dark World Dealings, and Mind Crush. So this isn't amazing against them, but it does help to get rid of the discard engines. Same with Mystical Space Typhoon, it's the same idea. Just to remove the discard engine, to remove the Gates of the Dark World. If you know that they have a Mind Crush face down and you don't want to search or anything, then you can activate the Mystical Space Typhoon and force them to declare a name. They don't have to chain it, obviously, but they might try to. And then if they're wrong, they discard a card randomly instead of discarding a card from your hand. So it's good that way because it pushes the odds in your favor instead. Mind Crush being activated either way is good for Dark Worlds, so this is mainly just for the field spell and for Dark Smog. Along those same lines, you could run Ancient Fairy Dragon if you're running Ancient Fairy Dragon in your extra deck, because he destroys field spell cards. So if you're a deck that runs field spells like Dragoonides or something along those lines, then going into Ancient Fairy Dragon is probably a pretty good idea because you can destroy their discard engine and then also set your own field spell. So just it's an extra deck choice to keep in mind when facing Dark Worlds. And then one other kind of suggestion. It doesn't really stop, like, it doesn't banish Grapha, it doesn't prevent their discard effects, and it doesn't remove the discard engine, but it does shut down the deck, is Consecrated Light. Consecrated Light is really good against Dark Worlds because neither player can normal or special summon dark monsters or declare an attack with a dark monster. Consecrated Light can't be destroyed by battle with a dark monster, and you take no battle damage from those battles. So if you combo this card with something like a Soul Drain or a Shadow Imprisoning Mirror, then they literally can't do anything because you have the Shadow Imprisoning Mirror on the field or Soul Drain on the field to prevent all of their discard effects. They can't normal or special summon monsters, so they can't normal summon their Snow, they can't special summon their Grapha. So essentially you've completely sopped the deck. So it's a really nice side choice against Dark Worlds, but once again it's kind of like Gemini Imps. You don't want to side it unless your side is completely aimed towards Dark Worlds because that's your worst matchup. Otherwise I would only run the Soul Drains. Oh, that's actually a card that I did not talk about, and a Soul Release. This is back to the Banishing Grapha, but Soul Release. Select up to 5 cards from the graveyard and remove them from play. So if they happen to get all of their Graphas in graveyard and you have this in your hand, you can activate Soul Release and banish all of their Graphas. It's only up to 5 cards, so you don't have to banish anything else. I still would, just because it's useful, because they can still Monster Reborn something. So I would banish like their engine, probably a couple Snows, and their Graphas. But this is also a really good card against Dark Worlds because it basically cripples them once again. All the cards in this video cripple Dark Worlds. Anyways, that's the video on how to beat Dark Worlds. I hope you enjoyed. This is mainly just siding for Dark Worlds, this series, so I'm probably going to call this series like siding against the meta or something like that. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed, and please look out for my next videos. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment below. Thanks. Bye.